Before we begin this incredible true story, please subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon so you never miss another amazing story like this one. The morning sun cast long shadows across the palace gates as Officer James Mitchell stood at his post. He had been a palace guard for 12 years, and in all that time, he had seen countless tourists, protesters, and curious onlookers. But nothing could have prepared him for what was about to happen on this ordinary Tuesday morning. It started with a small voice. A young girl, no more than 8 years old, tugged at his uniform sleeve. She had dark, curly hair and wore a pink backpack that seemed too big for her small frame. Her eyes were wide with fear and tears streamed down her cheeks. James looked down at her, initially thinking she was lost or separated from her parents. This happened often at the palace, and he was trained to handle such situations with care. But when the girl spoke, her words made his blood run cold. She pointed across the street to a white van parked near the fountain. The van had been sitting there for nearly 20 minutes, its engine running, windows tinted so dark that nobody could see inside. The girl told James that she had seen something terrible. She said she saw a woman being pushed into that van. The woman was crying and trying to fight back. James knelt down to the girl's eye level. He asked her name, and she whispered that it was Sophie. He asked her where her parents were, and she pointed to a nearby cafe where her mother was getting coffee. Sophie explained that she had been waiting outside when she witnessed what happened. She saw 2 men grab a woman from the sidewalk and force her into the van. The woman had dropped her purse. It was still lying on the ground near a bench. The palace guard felt a chill run down his spine. His training kicked in immediately. He could not ignore this, even if there was a chance the girl was mistaken. He radioed his supervisor and requested backup. Within minutes, 2 more guards joined him at the gate. James explained the situation quickly, and they agreed to investigate. One guard stayed with Sophie to keep her safe and calm, while James and his colleague approached the suspicious van as they walked across the plaza. James noticed several things that confirmed his suspicions. The van's license plate was partially covered with mud, making it difficult to read. The engine was still running, creating a low rumble that seemed out of place in the peaceful morning atmosphere. There were no company logos or markings on the vehicle, which was unusual for a commercial van parked in such a prominent location. His heart pounded in his chest as they got closer. James knocked firmly on the driver's side window. There was no response. He knocked again, louder this time, and identified himself as palace security. Still nothing. His colleagues circled around to the back of the van, checking for any signs of movement or sounds from inside. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Other guards had now secured the area, and curious tourists began to gather at a safe distance. Wondering what was happening then, suddenly, the van's engine revved. James stepped back instinctively, his hand moving toward his radio. The driver was preparing to flee. But before the van could move, police cars arrived, sirens blaring, blocking all possible escape routes. The timing was perfect. The palace security had called the police immediately after Sophie's report, and they had responded with impressive speed. Officers surrounded the vehicle with weapons drawn, ordering whoever was inside to exit with their hands up. The standoff lasted for what felt like an eternity, but was actually only 3 minutes. James stood his ground, his training keeping him focused, despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. The police repeated their commands, their voices firm and authoritative. Finally, the driver's door opened slowly. A man in his 30s stepped out, hands raised above his head. He had a nervous expression on his face, and his eyes darted around as if looking for an escape route that didn't exist. Police officers immediately moved in to secure him. They pushed him against the side of the van and handcuffed him swiftly. Another officer moved to the passenger side, where a second man emerged, looking equally frightened. But James's attention was fixed on the back of the van. That was where the truth would be revealed. That was where they would find out if Sophie's desperate plea had been real or imagined. A senior police officer approached the rear doors of the van. He called out, asking if anyone was inside. There was a muffled sound, something between a cry and a whimper. James felt his stomach tighten. Sophie had been telling the truth. The officer carefully opened the doors, and what they found inside shocked everyone present. A woman in her mid-20s sat bound with rope, a piece of cloth tied around her mouth as a gag. Her eyes were red from crying, and her clothes were disheveled from struggling. Officers quickly climbed into the van to free her. They removed the gag first, and the woman gasped for air, coughing and sobbing simultaneously. Her hands were untied next, and she immediately wrapped her arms around herself, trembling uncontrollably. A female police officer brought a blanket and draped it over her shoulders, speaking to her in gentle, reassuring tones. The woman could barely speak, but she managed to nod when asked if she was hurt. Paramedics arrived moments later to check her condition. James turned to look back at Sophie, who was still standing with the guard near the palace gates. Even from this distance, he could see the relief wash over her small face. This brave little girl had potentially saved a life today. If she had remained silent, if she had been too scared to speak up, or if the adults around her had dismissed her concerns, the outcome could have been tragically different. The woman in the van might have disappeared forever, becoming another missing person statistic. The two men were arrested on the spot. Police found evidence inside the van that suggested this was not their first crime. There were photographs of other women, addresses written on scraps of paper, and materials used for restraining victims. The investigation would later reveal that these men were part of a larger criminal network involved in human trafficking. They had been operating for months, carefully selecting victims and moving them across the country. The woman they had kidnapped that morning was a university student named Emma, who had been walking to class. News crews arrived within the hour. The story spread quickly through social media and television broadcasts. A young girl had alerted palace security about a kidnapping in progress, leading to a dramatic rescue and the arrest of dangerous criminals. James found himself giving statements to police detectives, describing exactly what Sophie had told him and how events had unfolded. He praised the little girl's courage and quick thinking, emphasizing that she was the true hero of the day, Sophie's mother, who had been frantically searching for her daughter after returning from the cafe, was brought to the scene by police. When she learned what Sophie had done, she hugged her daughter tightly, tears streaming down her face. She was terrified by how close her child had been to such danger, but also incredibly proud of her bravery. Sophie had understood that something wrong was happening and had found the courage to speak up to a stranger in uniform. The rescued woman, Emma, was taken to the hospital for examination and treatment. Physically, she had only minor injuries, but the psychological trauma would take much longer to heal. She had been walking to her morning lecture when the two men approached her, pretending to ask for directions. Before she knew what was happening, they had grabbed her and forced her into the van. She fought back as hard as she could, screaming and trying to break free, but they were too strong. In those terrifying minutes inside the van, she thought she might never see her family again. Emma later requested to meet Sophie, the little girl who had saved her life. The meeting was arranged a week after the incident, in a quiet room at the police station with both families present. When Emma saw Sophie, she immediately knelt down and hugged her, thanking her over and over again. Emma told Sophie that she was the bravest person she had ever met. Sophie, shy and overwhelmed by all the attention, simply said she was glad Emma was safe. It was a moment that brought tears to everyone's eyes. The story captured the nation's attention in a way that few events do. People were moved by Sophie's innocence and courage, by James's professionalism and quick response, and by Emma's survival against terrible odds. The incident sparked important conversations about public safety, the importance of teaching children to trust their instincts, and how communities need to look out for one another. Schools began incorporating lessons about recognizing dangerous situations and the importance of reporting suspicious activity to trusted adults. James Mitchell became something of a reluctant celebrity. Interview requests poured in from news outlets around the world. He appeared on morning television shows, always making sure to redirect attention to Sophie and to emphasize the importance of listening to children when they report concerns. He explained that in his training, guards were taught never to dismiss anyone's concerns, no matter how young or old they were. That principle had proven its value beyond measure on that fateful morning. The palace where James worked issued a statement commending his actions and those of his fellow guards. They announced that Sophie would be given a special civilian commendation for her bravery. The ceremony was held at the palace, with Sophie dressed in her best clothes, standing nervously as officials praised her heroism. She received a medal and a certificate, along with a scholarship fund that had been established in her name to support her future education. Photographers captured the moment, and the image of the small girl holding her medal became iconic. The two arrested men faced serious criminal charges. As the investigation deepened, police discovered they were connected to at least 6 other missing person cases. Families who had been searching desperately for their loved ones finally got answers, though not all the news was good. Some victims were found alive and rescued from horrible situations. Others, tragically, were discovered to have lost their lives. The criminal network was dismantled, with arrests made in multiple cities. Prosecutors built strong cases. Both men eventually received lengthy prison sentences. Emma returned to her university studies after taking time to recover. She became an advocate for victims of violence and worked with organizations dedicated to preventing human trafficking. She often spoke publicly about her experience, always mentioning Sophie and James by name, crediting them with giving her a second chance at life. Emma's strength in facing her trauma and using it to help others inspired many people who followed her story. Sophie's life changed in ways her family never expected. She received letters and gifts from people all over the country who wanted to thank her. Her school held a special assembly in her honor. Other children looked up to her, asking her how she found the courage to speak up. Sophie always gave the same simple answer. She saw someone who needed help and found someone who could help them. To her, it seemed like the obvious thing to do, though adults recognized it as an act of remarkable bravery. In the months following the rescue, Sophie struggled with some difficult emotions. She had nightmares about the van and worried about what might have happened if things had gone differently. Her parents noticed the changes in their normally cheerful daughter and sought help from a child psychologist. The counseling sessions helped Sophie process what she had witnessed and her role in the rescue. The therapist explained that it was normal to feel scared after witnessing something frightening, that her decision to get help was exactly right. James also found himself reflecting deeply on that morning. He thought about all the times people had approached him with various concerns, and he wondered if he had always given them the attention they deserved. The incident reinforced for him why his job mattered beyond just standing at a gate. He was a guardian, someone people should be able to trust in moments of crisis. He started volunteering to train younger guards, emphasizing the importance of taking every report seriously and acting quickly. When something seemed wrong, the van itself became evidence in a complex legal case. Forensic teams spent weeks examining every inch of it, collecting fingerprints, DNA samples, and other materials that would help prosecutors build their case. They found disturbing evidence of meticulous planning by the criminals. There were maps marking locations, schedules of potential victims, and tools designed specifically for abduction. The level of organization was chilling and demonstrated how dangerous these men truly were. Emma's family could not find adequate words to express their gratitude. Her parents traveled to meet Sophie's family, bringing flowers and gifts, though they knew nothing could truly repay the debt they felt they owed. Emma's father, a businessman, established a foundation dedicated to public safety education, naming it in honor of Sophie's courage. The foundation funded programs teaching children and adults how to recognize dangerous situations and respond appropriately. It became his life's mission after nearly losing his daughter. The media attention gradually faded, as it always does, but the impact of that day continued to ripple outward. Police departments across the country reviewed their protocols for responding to reports from children. Several jurisdictions implemented new training programs specifically focused on taking children's observations seriously. Studies had shown that children were often dismissed when reporting crimes, sometimes with tragic consequences. Sophie's story became a case study in why listening to young witnesses was crucial. Sophie returned to her normal routine of school and playtime. Though she was forever changed by her experience, she became more observant of her surroundings, more aware of people who seemed to be in distress. Her teachers noticed she had developed a strong sense of justice and often stood up for classmates who were being bullied or treated unfairly. The experience had awakened something in her, a desire to help others and make the world safer. James continued his duties at the palace. but he carried the memory of that day with him always. Whenever he saw a child approaching, he made sure to give them his full attention. He never wanted to risk missing another crucial report because he was too busy or distracted. His colleagues noticed the change in him, how he had become even more vigilant and responsive. Some of them admitted that Sophie's case had changed how they approached their own duties as well. The anniversary of the rescue became a significant date for everyone involved. Emma marked it as her second birthday, the day she was given her life back. Sophie's family used it as an opportunity to teach her about the lasting impact of doing the right thing. James took the day off work to spend time in quiet reflection, grateful that he had been in the right place at the right time and had made the right decision. The local community held a small memorial service, not of mourning, but of celebration for a life saved and evil stopped. As years passed, the story of Sophie and the Palace Guard became part of local legend. New guards joining the palace security force were told about that morning during their training. It served as a powerful reminder of why their vigilance mattered and why they should never underestimate anyone who approached them with concerns. The incident had transformed from a single event into a teaching moment that would influence security practices for generations. Sophie grew older, and while the intense public attention had faded, she never forgot what happened or the responsibility that came with it. In school, when her class studied current events and social issues, she found herself drawn to topics of justice and public safety. Her teachers encouraged her interests, recognizing that she had a unique perspective shaped by her early experience. Sophie began to consider careers in law enforcement or social work, wanting to build on that first moment of bravery. Emma completed her university degree and went on to graduate school, studying psychology with a focus on trauma recovery. Her own experience had shown her how critical proper support was for survivors of violent crimes. She worked with therapy programs and victim advocacy groups, using her story to help others understand that recovery was possible. She remained in contact with Sophie's family, sending birthday cards every year and occasional updates about her work and life. The criminal network that had been disrupted continued to be investigated for years. Law enforcement agencies discovered connections spanning multiple countries. International cooperation led to additional arrests and the rescue of more victims. The case became one of the most significant human trafficking busts in recent history. Prosecutors and investigators often cited the initial rescue as the breakthrough that made everything else possible. One alert child and one responsive guard had triggered the unraveling of an entire criminal enterprise. James received several awards and commendations throughout his career, but he always said the medal from that morning meant more to him than any other recognition. He kept a photograph in his locker of the ceremony where Sophie received her civilian commendation. On difficult days, when his work felt routine or thankless, he would look at that photo and remember why he had chosen this profession. He remembered that sometimes the smallest voice carried the most important message. The palace itself became a symbol of safety for the community in a new way. Parents told their children that if they ever felt scared or saw something wrong, they could go to the palace guards for help. The security force embraced this role, implementing a formal protocol for handling reports from children and vulnerable people. They set up a special training program that taught guards how to communicate effectively with young witnesses and how to respond to various emergency situations. Sophie's parents often reflected on how differently things could have turned out if they had been more restrictive, if they had not taught Sophie to trust her instincts and speak up. If she had been too shy to approach a stranger in uniform, Emma might never have been found. They shared their parenting approach with other families, emphasizing the importance of teaching children both caution and courage. It was a delicate balance, but one they believed was essential for raising confident, aware young people. The white van, after serving its purpose as evidence, was eventually destroyed. But its image remained seared in the memories of everyone involved. For Emma, it represented the worst moment of her life. For Sophie, it was the moment she learned that even children could make a difference in fighting evil. For James, it was a reminder that vigilance and quick action could mean the difference between life and death. Each of them carried different lessons from the same terrible vehicle. 10 years after the incident, a documentary film crew decided to revisit the story. They interviewed everyone involved, now seeing how their lives had unfolded in the decades since that morning. Sophie was now a young woman preparing to enter university herself, planning to study criminal justice. She spoke articulately about her experience. No longer the shy little girl, but a confident person shaped by extraordinary circumstances. She explained that the incident had given her life direction and purpose. Emma had become a respected therapist and author, having written a book about surviving trauma and rebuilding life afterward. She dedicated the book to Sophie, writing in the acknowledgments that she owed every page, every word, every moment of her continued life to a brave 8-year-old girl who refused to stay silent. The book became a bestseller and helped countless other survivors find hope and healing. Emma donated a portion of the proceeds to Sophie's scholarship fund and to anti-trafficking organizations. James had risen through the ranks and now trained new security personnel across multiple government facilities. His teaching style emphasized the human element of security work, reminding trainees that they were not just protecting buildings but people. He often began his training sessions by telling Sophie's story, using it to illustrate how anyone, regardless of age or background, might provide crucial information. His students left his courses with a renewed sense of purpose and responsibility. The reunion organized by the documentary crew was emotional for everyone. Sophie and Emma had not seen each other in several years, and they embraced like family members. James arrived in his formal uniform, still carrying himself with the same dignity and professionalism that had defined his response that morning. They sat together, sharing memories and reflecting on how a single moment had shaped all their futures. The cameras captured genuine affection and respect between three people bound by extraordinary circumstances. During the filming, Emma told Sophie something she had never shared before. She explained that in the darkest moment inside that van, when she thought she might not survive, she had prayed for help. Minutes later, Sophie had appeared, like an answer to that prayer. Sophie smiled and told Emma that she was glad she had been paying attention that morning, glad she had trusted what she saw, and glad she had found someone like James who took her seriously. It was a simple exchange, but one filled with profound meaning. The documentary explored the broader impact of the incident on public safety policy. Experts discussed how the case had influenced law enforcement training, school curricula, and community awareness programs. Statistics showed a measurable increase in reports of suspicious activity from children. Following the widespread publicity of Sophie's story, even more importantly, those reports were being taken more seriously by authorities, leading to several other rescues and crime prevention successes. Sophie's parents participated in the documentary as well, discussing the challenges and rewards of raising a child who had experienced something so extraordinary at such a young age. They talked about the counseling they had sought for the entire family, not just Sophie, recognizing that trauma and heroism both required processing. They expressed pride in the young woman their daughter had become, grateful that the experience had strengthened rather than broken her spirit. The film concluded with all the participants sharing their hopes for the future. Emma hoped that her work would help more survivors find their voices and heal from their experiences. James hoped to continue improving security practices and training the next generation of guardians. Sophie hoped to work in law enforcement herself someday, helping to protect others the way James had protected Emma. Their stories intertwined, creating a narrative of hope, courage, and the power of ordinary people to do extraordinary things. On the day the documentary premiered, it drew massive viewership across the nation. People who had followed the original story were eager to see where everyone was now. New audiences discovered the remarkable tale for the first time. Social media filled with comments praising Sophie's childhood bravery, James's professionalism, and Emma's resilience. The story resonated because it reminded everyone that heroes were not just found in movies or history, books, but walking among us in everyday life. The legacy of that morning continued to grow. Schools named awards after Sophie, recognizing students who demonstrated moral courage and civic responsibility. The Palace Guard Service established the James Mitchell Award for Excellence in Duty and Service. Emma's foundation expanded internationally, working with organizations around the world to combat human trafficking and support survivors. What began with one little girl's plea to one attentive guard had blossomed into a movement that saved lives and changed perspectives. Sophie, Emma, and James remained connected throughout their lives, an unlikely family bound by crisis and courage. They attended each other's important life events, celebrated successes together, and supported each other through difficulties. Their story proved that the worst moments could lead to lasting bonds, and that when good people act quickly and decisively, evil can be defeated. It was a lesson the nation took to heart, one that would inspire countless others to speak up, pay attention, and never underestimate the power of doing the right thing at the right moment.